This is all about true stories with narcissistic characters, and these are really well-written books. To write a memoir, you have to become a real big reader of memoirs, and especially when you're writing about a topic that is as heavy as this. You know, this is a heavy topic, and it can be really tricky to do. It takes a lot of skill to do it to where anyone wants to read it, you know. And you'll see that there are a lot more memoirs about times that are sort of cut out of regular life. Like, it may be childhood, like before they ever even became a writer. So that's where a lot of stories come from, like, for instance, The Glass Castle. Jeanette Walls, she was a journalist, and but her story basically is about her parents who were, you know, they lived just in absolute poverty. But the parents were really narcissistic. They were completely self-absorbed and really neglectful of their kids. A little bit insane, and also alcoholic. You know, the dad was a raging alcoholic. But the way that she does it is she has this way of adding humor. You know, she has rose-colored glasses. What makes, like, my story particularly tricky is because so much of it has to do with my adult life. And people are not as forgiving of adults. You know, if we're going to be forgiving of someone who has parents like this when they're a kid, and the whole story basically is all about childhood. It's basically all about childhood. Big chunk of memoirs are. And also I used to think that the people that wrote memoirs were the people that had the most interesting lives. Or that the most interesting lives would be the ones that end up in books. But that's not necessarily the case. The ones that end up in books are the ones that are the lives that happen to writers. And writers, by and large, don't have super fascinating lives because they're inside writing all the time. so that's why I think a lot of times that the stories end up coming from either like before they started writing, or while they're away on a trip, or during a period of an addiction or an illness. I feel like our stories are hard to tell. There's a stigma about our stories, you know, and it feels to me like people are judging you, like they think that you should be able to fix things with your parents, or you know, they just don't get it. You know, they just don't get it. Love Warrior. This book, Love Warrior, a bestseller a couple of years ago, I think now. Bestseller a couple of years ago. And, you know, she's got Elizabeth Gilbert, Brene Brown, Marianne Williamson on the back. You know, did really, really well. Very first sentence in the book. I was loved. I was loved. If love could prevent pain, I'd never have suffered. And then this is a whole poem about her birth and about how celebrated she was. Okay, first of all, so I read that, and that's just painful for me. I don't know if you guys have that experience. It's just painful for me. I think, I don't know what that's like. I can't imagine what that's like. Her big pivotal moment, her big tragic moment, where the, you know, is the turning point in the story, is she's 25 years old, and she's got a hangover. She was drinking the night before, you know, she's been drinking and partying a lot, and she has an unplanned pregnancy. And so she's on the bathroom floor with her, you know, sick with a hangover, with a planned pregnancy, positive pregnancy test in her hand. And I'm sorry, you guys, maybe this will make you, I mean, you'll judge me because, but I'm thinking to myself, that is a million people's story. I'm sorry, but I mean, how many of us, you know, partied a little bit more when we were in our 20s? How many of us had, you know, risky, you know, unplanned, you know, unplanned pregnancies? Well, that too. But I mean, you know, weren't always so careful with it. You know, I mean, that just didn't seem like an earth-shattering thing to. I would never have thought that I had a book to write. You know, this was her big pivotal moment, and it goes on to. She goes on, like, she gets married and has this perfect life and these 3 kids, and she finds out basically her husband's been cheating on her, you know, throughout the marriage. But even how she handles that, even how she handles her husband's unfaithfulness, did not ring a bell at all, because she has this family. She's loved by her family, and when you're not loved by your family, it makes how you respond to things like that quite different. In other words, you put up with a lot more abuse. Oprah our stories. Would Oprah be interested in our stories? You know, and you wonder that. Augustine Burroughs, The Wolf at the Table. The Wolf at the Table. Now, if anyone knows anything about Augustine Burroughs, his most famous work is Running with Scissors. In that, he's talking about his mother, and he barely touches on the father. Well, this one is all about the father, who sounds like a purely terrifying guy, a total sociopath. And I believe that he was played by Alec Baldwin, actually, in Running with Scissors. He has a fairly small part, because that book is, that story is, and Annette Bening plays his mother. Annette Bening plays his mother. And it's a really incredible story, and to know that it's all true is quite crazy. And I believe, I could be wrong about this, but I do believe that Augustine Burroughs is a self-taught writer who didn't really go to college or anything, and that he wrote, I think it was Running with Scissors got published, and then his publisher wanted to see what else he had. He didn't have any other manuscripts, so he let her look through his journals, and he had journals that were just about publishable as they were, which, if anyone that watches my channel is a writer, knows how utterly remarkable that is. You know, that he would have something publishable in his journals. You know, that's pretty incredible. If you're feeling really bad about your parents, think of Augustine Burroughs, because I think he's got some really incredible parents, and Alec Baldwin, I think, was a really great choice to play his dad. Of course, I'd seen the movie first, so I couldn't get Alec Baldwin out of my mind when I read this book. But when Augustine Burroughs was small, his father was a shadowy presence in his life, a form on the stairs, a cough from the basement, a silent figure smoking a cigarette in the dark. As Augustine grew older, something sinister within his father began to unfurl, something dark and secretive that could not be named. Betrayal after shocking betrayal ensued, and Augustine's childhood was over. The kind of father he wanted didn't exist. This father was distant, aloof, and uninterested. And then the games began. With A Wolf at the Table, Augustine Burroughs makes a quantum leap into an untapped emotional terrain. The radical pendulum swing between love and hate, the unspeakably terrifying relationship between father and son. Told with scorching honesty and penetrating insight, it is a story for anyone who has ever longed for unconditional love from a parent. Though harrowing and brutal, A Wolf at the Table will ultimately leave you buoyed with profound joy of simply being alive. It's a memoir of stunning psychological cruelty and the redemptive power of hope. Duke of Deception. Duke of Deception by Jeffrey Wolfe. Now, look at this. He has a brother, the two brothers, Jeffrey and Tobias Wolfe. They were not raised together. The parents split up, and one each took one boy. They both became best-selling writers. Separately became best-selling writers. And they both had crazy, crazy childhoods. So Duke Wolfe, which we call him Duke of Deception, Memoirs of My Father, the Duke of Deception. A little bit endearing. I mean, a little bit more endearing than maybe some of the others, because he has joie de vivre. He has some... you can kind of get caught up in his fantasies, but what he really does, he's really brilliant, and you just kind of keep getting the thought, like, what if you just really put some of that energy into just really doing some of the things? Because he's able to pull off, he lies his way through everything. He basically says he went to this top-notch boarding school as a kid. He lies his way into, through college degrees that he never earned. He gets his way into jobs and pulls them off. And, eventually he gets caught and he has to keep scrambling around. But it's really amazing what he's able to pull off. And you kind of think, what if he just applied himself to doing it for real? He probably would have done it just fine. But, obviously not cut out for being a parent. This guy is just totally not cut out for being a parent at all. He says about it, an enormously moving story of familial love and hate, coming of age. No man can finish this book without resolving to take stock of his relationship with his own father. He's quite a bit older than, okay, so this was 79. So this one was published in 79, this one was published in 89. Abundant with complexities, contradictions, family sympathy, first-rate autobiography, conscientious, intimate, lucid and complicated, a good novel. Cover it's true. Duke Wolf was a flawless specimen of the American clubman, a product of Yale and the OSS, a one-time fighter pilot turned aviation engineer. Duke Wolf was a failure who flunked out of the series of undistinguished schools, was passed up for military service, and supported himself with desperately improvised scams, exploiting employers, wives, and finally his own son. And sadly, you know, he dies penniless and alone. But he is a sympathetic character. There's something about him that is a sympathetic character. And, you know, I don't know, but definitely is such a worth a read. And then Tobias Wolff is his younger brother. And Tobias Wolff wrote the crazy stories that happened to him and his mother when they took off. And this boy's life was, I don't know, Robert De Niro seems to like get lots of roles in memoirs turned into movies because Robert De Niro played a really bad guy in this book, in this movie, when this was turned into a movie. Of Boyhood in the 50s, a true modern classic, introduces us to the young Toby Wolf, but by turns tough and vulnerable, crafty and bumbling. Separated by divorce from his father and brother, Toby and his mother are constantly on the move as he fights for identity and self-respect against the unrelenting hostility of a new stepfather. His experiences are at once poignant and comical, and Wolf masterfully recreates the frustrations, cruelties, and joys of adolescence. His various schemes, running away to Alaska, forging checks and stealing cars, lead eventually to an act of outrageous self-invention that releases him into a new world of possibilities. Awesome story. And to know that, like, these guys raised separately are able to end up becoming story writers. Like, okay, this is a good one too. And this one, Robert De Niro played in the movie of this one too. Another bullshit night in Sex City. This became a movie called Finding Flynn. And Finding Flynn, oh, who's the actor's name? The actor who played the main character. Basically, this story is a true story, and this is a different style. It's kind of a unique style. It's written in little pieces, little snippets that are each complete in and of themselves. So it's not like a sustained narrative throughout the whole thing. So it's little pieces. So it makes it easy to stop. You can, you know, if you need to stop, and you don't have to hold your attention on anything for sustained narrative exactly. But it's a really unique way of writing, and he has used this style in several books now. I really like it. Like Ticking is the Bomb is another one of his books. But in talking about the narcissist, his father is a quintessential overt narcissist. Just absolutely, the overt narcissists in these books are really big, larger than life, and they are pathological liars, just absolute pathological liars, and this guy is one of them. But I think the beginning of this book, I think this is the one that starts this way. It's so great. The first lines in the film.
Don't worry, you're in the hands of a master storyteller. America has produced only 3 classic writers: Mark Twain, J.D. Salinger, and me.
His father's like larger than life, has these crazy things. His mother ends up, she is with him just a really short time. They have 2 kids. He basically runs out on the family and leaves her with two little boys. She was raised in with a family that had a lot of money, but she's kind of disowned. She definitely seems to have been a black sheep of her family. And here's the thing, I have ADD. On top of all my other problems, I have ADD. So trying to do this and deal with the puppies, and you know, it's like he wants to approach them, but he doesn't want to be approached. That's what basically it seems like. So he's like, let me come to you, don't come to me. It's really funny. Nick Flynn, great writer. Usually what he does is he takes a couple of topics and weaves them together and kind of braids them together. And so in this one, he is talking about the meeting of his father, and he's weaving that together with his own substance abuse, or he's dealing with his, coming to terms with his addiction. And so his mother, his mother raises the 2 boys by herself, and they're always kind of broke and stuff. And then she kills herself when he, like the first year that he goes to college, she kills herself. And So there's some about that too. But he's working in a homeless shelter when his father comes in, and he meets his father. And his father is an alcoholic, and he is, going and he goes, he's getting crazy. I don't know if it's just the alcoholism that makes him crazy or what, or old age. Because this is the thing of these narcissists. They live forever. They live to be, of course, this guy lived to be really old. Even though he was sleeping on the streets, he was, had a really rough life, but he lived to be really, really old. And his son took care of him. He did, even though he was, didn't owe him that, that's for sure. So it says Nick Flynn met his father when he was working as a caseworker in a homeless shelter in Boston. As a teenager, he received letters from his stranger father, a self-proclaimed poet and con man, doing time in federal prison for his bank robbery. Another Bullshit Night in Sex City tells the story of the trajectory that led Nick and his father onto the streets, into the shelter, and finally to each other. And I really like Nick Flynn. He's, I think, a great writer. But this book is a real different kind of style. So another one, the narcissistic father. And what's really great is when you get people that can write about these topics and sort of find a way of adding some kind of levity so that other people want to read it. That's really tricky, really, really tricky, especially when these stories are not childhood, especially when it's your own flawed adult self in the story. Very hard to get people on your side, when you're telling stories about, when it goes against things that people typically don't want to hear about, mothers and fathers who don't love their kids, that goes against what we want to believe about things. And so you're already up against that when you're going to write a story like that to begin with. And then if you're going to come out to be a sympathetic adult figure who makes mistakes and has flaws and, does things where they end up, going to jail and things like that, like it's true in my story, it's really, a really, really tricky thing to get people on your side. And so I have to read a lot of stories to see how they do it. Okay, I started off on this book and I dropped off. I didn't finish it. Falling Leaves by Adeline Yen Ma. Okay, this is a book. Another one. If you are feeling really bad about your family, here's another book that you can go, okay, well, at least I have Adeline Yen Ma's family, because, wow, were these guys abusive. It's a Chinese family, and she is the fourth child, and her mother, apparently, she was at home, her mother basically dies 2 weeks after giving birth to her. She gets some kind of septicemia or something, and it sounds like the father was narcissistic for sure, and he neglectful, and you know how they are about illnesses. He neglected her, and he didn't get her medical care, even though they have tons of that. They're a wealthy family, but didn't get her the medical care that she needed, and she died. And so, especially in Chinese culture, this made her the black sheep. That means it really makes you bad news if your mother dies after having, in birth. So she was just the black sheep of the family. And then the father marries this Eurasian woman who, and they have 2 more children, a son and a daughter. The son becomes the complete golden child. He just is it's outrageous, the favoritism. Ironically, well, I don't, these are old stories. I don't know how much I should tell. I don't want to give them away, so I won't tell you, big pivotal details about the story. But this proverb says, falling leaves return to their roots. Okay. So begins the extraordinary memoir of courageous woman's triumph over despair in a lifelong search for acceptance, love, and understanding, unfolding against a turbulent backdrop of social, political, and cultural upheaval. Falling Leaves is at once a work of heartfelt intimacy and a rare portrait of 20th century China. Adeline's mother died giving birth to her. As a result, she was deemed bad luck and considered inferior and insignificant by the other siblings, who bullied her relentlessly. When her father took a beautiful Eurasian as his new wife, at a time when everything Western was coveted as superior to Chinese, Adeline found herself at the mercy of a cold and cruelly manipulative stepmother. And oh my gosh, was she ever. Niang treated all of the stepchildren as second-class citizens. The full power of her wrath was unleashed on Adeline. Her only refuge was in the arms of a beloved aunt who lavished affection and encouragement on the child. Despite her unhappiness, Adeline excelled at school and became a top student. Now here's the thing. She became a best-selling author, but she's also a doctor. She's an MD. She's a physician. The Red Army approached in 1949. The family moved to Hong Kong. Adeline was shuttled off to boarding school in virtual isolation, forbidden visitors, mail, and all contact with her family. Burying herself in books, she dreamed of freedom and a new life. And there were like some of the saddest things. Like she was at this school where like little signs of love, like little signs that your family cared about you, or things like at breakfast you could get a fresh egg. Like she never got one. Like it was just like this coveted thing. It was just so totally heartbreaking. Mi-Tan writes to the back. I read for 2 nights, sleepless, my heart pierced by Adeline Yenma's account of her terrible childhood. Falling Leaves is a potent psychological drama pitting a stubborn little girl against the most merciless of adversaries and rivals, her own family. I am still haunted by Ma's memoir. How could any child endure cruelty of this magnitude? Why is our need to belong to a family, any family, as vital as air? And that's Amy Tan, who is the author of the Joy Luck Club. Definitely a good read. This one is particularly, I mean, a lot of people probably wouldn't like it because it's pretty heavy and doesn't have a lot of bouncing back. It's sort of, you know, it's pretty heavy. But them is Alexander Lieberman and Tatiana Duplessis were gifted Russian immigrants who fled occupied Paris in 1940 to become the first and grandest power couple of New York's fashion world. They hobnobbed with Dali, Marlene Dietrich, Nabokov. Nabokov is also another writer. They told American women how to look, where to travel, what to read. They loved each other fiercely and neurotically and treated everyone else with ruthless opportunism. As told by their daughter Francine, Alexander and Tatiana's story is fascinating, often heart-rending, filled with romance, pathos, and captures the chaos and glamour of post-war New York. Tatiana became an icon of New York fashion, and the hats she designed for Saks Fifth Avenue were what stylish women were wearing everywhere. Alexander Lieberman, who devotedly raised Francine as his own child from the time she was 9, eventually came to preside over the entire Condé Nast empire. Now, did you know Condé Nast is a person? That was a person's name, Condé Nast. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it's the name of a magazine. I did not know it was the name of a person. The glamorous life they shared was both creative and destructive, was marked by exceptional bond forged out of their highly charged love and raging self-centeredness. Their obsessive adulation of success and elegance was elevated to a kind of worship, and the high drama that characterized their lives followed them to their deaths. Tatiana, consumed with nostalgia for a long-lost Russia, spent her last years addicted to painkillers. Shortly after her death, Alexander, then age 80, shocked all who knew him by marrying her nurse. Of course. Somewhere in here it even actually said the word. Oh, here it is, right here. There they determinedly rose to the top of a high society, holding court to who's who list of the mid-century intellectuals, entertainers, flamboyant and outrageous, bold and brilliant. They were irresistible to friends like Marlene Dietrich, Salvador Dali, and the publishing tycoon Condé Nast. But to those who knew them well, they were also highly neurotic, narcissistic, and glacially self-promoting. Now, here's somebody who doesn't know that they're talking about, because you can't really be neurotic and narcissistic at the same time. Not really so much. They're probably thinking that narcissism means self-centered. They're probably thinking that is the synonym for self-centered. And so the crazy stuff they do in their narcissism, they're probably thinking of that as neurotic, meaning crazy. But it's just narcissistic. Because as we know, neurotic is the opposite of narcissistic. But anyhow, so like books like this, like Wild, for instance. Here's a writer who wrote about a time when she was on a trip, and but like her relationship with her mother was, she just loved her mother, and I was like, I wish I had a mother like that, And Elizabeth Gilbert is another one. Here's another one. Elizabeth Gilbert with Eat, Pray, Love. Eat, Pray, Love. I thought I just didn't relate to this story at all. And I know people loved it. People just loved it. But I thought, this isn't... I think, give me these problems. I take these problems any day. You know, she's got like, her parents love her. She's got plenty of money to go traveling around the world for a year. I'm like, that's not problems. You know, and the funny thing is the exact same time frame. Exact same time frame is when this was all happening to me. When my husband left me penniless and all that, was the exact same time that this was happening. And I was just like, it was just like, took it out right out of me. It was like so hard to relate. I could not relate. I was like, I wish I could just take a trip and go traveling around the world. You know, she had a career. She left her husband for being annoying. You know, basically, he was annoying. She left him for that. And, you know, but it was like, it was this big heart-rending thing. And she was, you know, I didn't get it. I just didn't get it. It's like, this girl doesn't have any problems. Give me her problems. But that's a good start. That should be a good start on some good books to read if you are either a writer or you just want to feel like you could read something that you can relate to, or you're not going to open up a book and read a story about all this loving parents and stuff that make you feel really bad.